These are 15 islands scattered around the coast of Britain where people are genuinely living outside the conventional system. No income tax on some of them, no cars on others. A few generate more renewable electricity than they actually consume, and on several, you can buy a house for less than the price of a parking space in central London. Most people in the United Kingdom have no idea these places exist. If they know the names at all, they file them under holiday destinations, postcard scenery, somewhere you visit for a long weekend and then forget about. But right now, people on these islands collect their own rainwater, generate their own power from wind and sun, grow their own food, fish the surrounding waters for protein, and pay a fraction of the taxes and living costs that mainland Britons accept without question. None of them are breaking any laws. They are not living in communes or squatting on abandoned land. Every single one of them is an ordinary person who decided to opt out of the noise and the expense and the relentless grind of modern mainland life, and who found a place within the British system where that decision actually works. This video covers 15 of those islands, moving through Scotland, England, Wales, Northern Ireland, and 3 crown dependencies that most people do not even realize are connected to Britain. We are going to look at what property costs, how the taxes actually work, where the electricity comes from, what the food situation looks like, and whether any of this is genuinely viable for someone watching right now who is thinking about selling up and starting somewhere new. So that the algorithm doesn't mislead you, if you've subscribed to the channel, we're starting with the island that rewrites the rules for everyone. Part 1. The island that bought itself. Isle of Eigg, Inner Hebrides. On the 12th of June 1997, something happened on a tiny island off the west coast of Scotland that had never been done before in the history of British land ownership. The residents of the Isle of Eigg bought their island out from under a series of private landlords who had controlled it for decades. Eigg sits 12 miles from the port of Mull in the Small Isles group, covering just 31 square kilometers. When the buyout happened, the population had collapsed to 65 people. The island had passed between a succession of private owners, the last being a German artist known as Maruma, and the community had no say over their own land, their own housing, or their own future. That changed when the Isle of Eigg Heritage Trust purchased the entire island for £1.5 million, funded by public and private donations alongside a £17,000 grant from Highlands and Islands Enterprise. 4 of the Trust's 6 directors were elected by the residents themselves, with Highland Council and the Scottish Wildlife Trust each holding 1 seat. That buyout did not just change Eigg. Hundreds of communities across the Highlands and Islands launched their own land purchases in the years that followed, and the Eigg model directly shaped the Scottish land reform legislation that came after it. But what happened next on the island itself turned out to be even more striking. On the 1st of February 2008, Eigg switched on the world's first community-owned off-grid renewable electricity system. Eigg Electric cost £1.6 million to build and pulls approximately 280 kilowatts from a mix of hydroelectric power at 110 kilowatts, wind turbines at 24 kilowatts, and an expanding solar array. A battery bank handles 24-hour backup, and 2 80-kilowatt diesel generators sit in reserve for emergencies. Around 95% of the island's electricity now comes from renewables. Every household on Eigg operates under a 5-kilowatt demand cap at any given moment, managed through a traffic light system across the community. Electricity runs at 23 pence per kilowatt hour with a 12 pence daily standing charge, which puts it among the cheapest community renewable energy systems anywhere in the United Kingdom. Carbon net zero by 2030 is the target. Almost no open property market exists on Eigg. The trust owns around 10 rental homes and is building its first 2 new affordable homes since the buyout took place. Land does not come up on the open market in any conventional sense, and you cannot simply arrive with money and buy your way in. The community decides who joins. That is the entire point. Eigg is not a place you purchase, it is a place you earn. Cars do not travel to the island by ferry, only foot passengers, except for blue badge holders. The community wood fuel business grew sales by 210%. 20,000 trees come out of the Eigg tree nursery every year. More than 600 investors put £195,000 into the Eigg brewery. A £3 million upgrade to the Anglesey community hub now houses a shop, cafe, craft shop, post office, and hot desking spaces. Population on Eigg has climbed roughly 70% since the buyout, from 65 to around 110. The island won the Nesta Big Green Challenge in 2010, collecting £300,000 and an Ashton UK Gold Award for cutting its carbon footprint by 48%. Every 12th of June, the community celebrates what they call Independence Day. What Eigg proved is something the rest of Britain has been slow to accept. A community of 100 people, on a small island with no grid connection and no wealthy benefactor, can own their own land, generate their own electricity from wind and water and sunlight, and build a functioning economy from nothing. If 100 people on a 31 square kilometer rock off the coast of Scotland can pull that off, the question is not whether it is possible. The question is why it has not happened everywhere. Part 2. The islands that generate more power than they use. Westray, Orkney. If Eigg is the proof of concept, Orkney is what happens when you scale it up. The Orkney archipelago generates more renewable electricity than it consumes, and that is not an aspiration pinned to a whiteboard somewhere. Verified figures from 2020 put Orkney's renewable output at 128% of its total electricity demand, up from 103% in 2013. Over 1,000 domestic renewable installations operate across the archipelago. More than 760 small wind turbines and over 370 solar panel systems sit on individual properties, which means roughly 10% of Orkney homes run their own microgeneration, compared to just 2.8% across the UK as a whole. Stromness hosts the European Marine Energy Centre, which leads the world in wave and tidal energy testing, and the £28.5 million Reflex Orkney project is pushing the islands toward full decarbonisation by 2030. Westray occupies the northwest corner of the archipelago, 47 square kilometers, with an estimated 600 residents, and it carries a different character from the Hebridean Islands further south. Where much of the western Scottish coast sits on waterlogged peat, Westray has surprisingly fertile soil. Cattle farming holds strong. Vegetable growing in polycrubs produces real yields. A modern fishing fleet works out of Pirawall, landing fresh white fish daily, and a lobster and crab processing factory runs on the island itself. A single 900-kilowatt community wind turbine, erected in 2009 through the Westray Development Trust, generates revenue that flows directly into community services across the island. Property on Westray starts at roughly £70,000 for a one-bedroom terraced house and tops out around £470,000 for a six-bedroom detached place, with a typical 2 to 3 bedroom home sitting between £190,000 and £275,000. Council tax at Band D comes in at £1,575 for 2025/26, which followed a 15% increase. One of the more enjoyable facts about Westray involves its air service. The scheduled flight from Westray to neighboring Papa Westray covers 1.7 miles in approximately 90 seconds, and the record stands at 53 seconds. Loganair has operated it since 1967, carrying around 5,000 passengers a year, which makes it officially the shortest scheduled commercial flight in the world. 3 shops serve the island, along with a hotel known for its fish and chips, a swimming pool, 2 galleries, a bakery, and a marina. Norse heritage runs deep here. The Westray wife figurine, pulled from the ground in 2009, turned out to be the oldest known depiction of a human face found anywhere in the British Isles, dating to around 3,500 BC. For anyone looking at self-sufficient island living with genuine agricultural potential, affordable property, community-owned renewable energy, and a local economy that actually functions, Westray sits near the top of the list. Part 3. Britain's most northerly island. Bets on space. Unst, Shetland. 60 degrees 45 minutes north. That is where Unst sits, making it the most northerly inhabited island in the British Isles. 120 square kilometers, 644 people as of the 2022 census, and reaching it requires what locals call triple insularity, which means a 20-minute ferry from Shetland mainland to Yell, a 25-minute drive across Yell, and then a 10-minute ferry to Unst itself. Wind here is constant and winter daylight drops to around 5 or 6 hours, but in summer the simmer dim stretches through the night, a long twilight that never quite becomes darkness. Property prices on Unst rank among the lowest in Britain. Listings start at £12,000 for a 2-acre plot and run up to approximately £300,000 for a larger house, with the average sold price hovering around £117,000. Band D council tax comes to just £1,387, the second lowest anywhere in Scotland. What balances those savings is freight. Shetland Islands Council puts the cost of living at 20 to 65% above the Scottish mainland, mostly because everything arrives by sea. And then there is the spaceport, Saxavord Spaceport, built on the bones of a Cold War RAF radar station that closed in 2005, now holds the distinction of being the United Kingdom's first fully licensed vertical launch facility. The Civil Aviation Authority granted a spaceport license in December 2023 and a launch license for the German-built RFA-1 rocket in January 2025, with the first orbital launch expected in 2026. 605 jobs across Scotland is the projected employment impact, with 140 of those based locally. For an island of 644 people that has bled population continuously since a peak of 2,269 in 1871, a spaceport is not a minor curiosity. It could be the biggest economic shift in Unst's modern history. More than 60 rural Viking longhouses have been discovered on Unst, the greatest density known anywhere in Europe. The Pure Energy Center works on hydrogen and renewable technologies. Robert Louis Stevenson visited in 1869, and the shape of Unst bears a close resemblance to his map of Treasure Island. This is the end of Britain in the most literal sense, and it may be about to become one of its most unexpected new chapters. Part 4. The Gaelic heartland where crofting still works. Isle of Lewis and Harris, Outer Hebrides. Lewis and Harris look like two islands on a map, but they form a single landmass of 2,178 square kilometers, the largest island in Scotland and the third largest in the British Isles. 24 miles of open water separates them from the Scottish mainland across the Minch, and this is where the Scottish Gaelic language holds its strongest ground. 19,680 people lived here as of the 2022 census, a 6% drop from 21,031 in 2011. Stornoway anchors the north with around 8,000 residents, while Tarbert serves Harris at roughly 550. Gaelic is spoken by 56% of Lewis residents and 60% of those on Harris, and Sunday observance remains part of the rhythm on Lewis in particular, though the old restrictions are gradually loosening. Average house prices land at approximately £159,000 on Lewis and £287,000 on Harris. Renovation projects appear from around £50,000, while premium Harris properties stretch to £645,000. A three-bedroom mid-terrace in Stornoway lists at roughly £122,500. All of that sits well below the UK average of approximately £290,000, but tourism is pushing Harris values higher, and a housing shortage squeezes availability across both halves of the island. Band D council tax runs £1,291 here, the third lowest in Scotland. Living costs sit above the national average though, with fuel poverty rates ranking among the worst in the country. Freight charges add a noticeable premium to groceries. What sets Lewis and Harris apart for self-sufficient living is crofting. Over 920 active crofters work the land, and the Crofting Commission logged more than 500 new entrants across Scotland in the year to March 2023, a 5-year high. Grants covering 80% of costs up to £25,000 are available for new entrants under 41. Acidic peaty soil limits traditional growing, but polycrubs, a polytunnel greenhouse hybrid built for extreme weather, have spread rapidly across the islands. Salmon, mackerel, and shellfish fishing remains excellent. Broadband has caught up faster than most people expect, with some communities now pulling 1 gigabit fiber connections. Harris Tweed, protected by an Act of Parliament since 1993, supports around 150 weavers and 160 ancillary workers across 3 mills, weaving cloth for clients including Dior. 5,000-year-old Callanish standing stones and the Lewis chessmen, found in 1831, anchor a cultural tourism economy estimated at £65 million a year. CalMax Stornoway to Ullapool Ferry crosses in 2 hours and 40 minutes, running approximately 13 times a week. A foot passenger return costs around £51. Bringing a car pushes that to roughly $144. Loganair flies daily from Stornoway Airport to Glasgow, Edinburgh, Inverness, and Aberdeen, and the Western Isles Hospital in Stornoway carries 116 beds with full services. Lewis and Harris is not the cheapest island here, and it is not the most remote. What it offers instead is the deepest infrastructure for self-sufficient living anywhere on this list, with crofting tenure, community land ownership, Gaelic cultural identity, and a functioning town that has a hospital and an airport. Part 5. The Inner Hebrides. Whiskey, wildlife, and a housing emergency. Mull, Islay, and Jura for Inner Hebridean islands tell three very different stories about what happens when island economies boom and what breaks when they do. Mull ranks as Scotland's fourth largest island at 875 square kilometers, with 3,063 residents as of the 2022 census. Just 3 kilometers separate it from the mainland at the nearest point, and Calmax ferry from Oban to Craignure takes only 45 minutes with up to 10 daily sailings, which puts it among the most accessible Hebridean islands. Tobermory, the main settlement of around 1,000 people, earned its fame as the filming location for BBC's Balamory. House prices on Mull run between £245,000 and £263,000, with listings stretching from £46,000 up to £895,000. The Garmany community-owned hydro scheme channels over £100,000 annually into a community benefit fund. Ben More, at 966 meters, stands as the only Munro outside the mainland and Skye. But here is the thing about Mull. Argyll and Bute Council declared a housing emergency, the first Scottish council to take that step. Zero unemployment has been reported on the island. The problem is not a shortage of work, it is a shortage of workers, because they cannot find anywhere to live. 1 in 3 residents was born in England, the highest proportion on any Scottish island over 1,000 population, and that inflow is part of the pressure. A 90-home development at Craignure has been approved, which could lift the population by more than 10%. Islay covers 620 square kilometers with approximately 3,200 residents, and the whiskey industry drives everything here. Average property prices sit between £298,000 and £315,000, the highest of any comparable Scottish island, inflated almost entirely by distillery employment demand. Between 10 and 12 active distilleries operate on Islay right now, including Ardbeg, Bowmore, Bruichladdich, Lagavulin, and Laphroaig, with several more under construction or in planning that could push the total to 14. Bruichladdich alone employs 110 people and carries B Corp certification. Agricultural land on Islay outperforms most of the Hebrides, with limestone and fertile lowlands supporting barley for the distilleries alongside dairy and livestock. A consented 10-megawatt tidal array in the Sound of Islay would be the world's first commercial-scale tidal energy project, though construction has stalled repeatedly. Loganair connects daily to Glasgow in around 40 minutes, and 205,000 distillery visitors arrived in 2019. And then there is Jura, 367 square kilometers, 258 people as of the 2022 census, which actually represents a 32% increase from 188 in 2001, bucking the decline that hits almost every other Scottish island. Jura runs on one road, approximately 40 miles of single track. One shop called Jura Stores sits in Craighouse, one distillery, and an estimated 5,000 to 7,000 red deer share the island, giving a ratio of roughly 20 deer to every human being. George Orwell lived at Barnhill Farmhouse on Jura from 1946 to 1949, completing 1984 there while nearly dying in the Gulf of Corryvreckan, the world's third largest whirlpool, which churns between Jura and the island of Scarba. He described Jura as extremely unget-it-able, and that description holds up well. Getting there means traveling through Islay first, then catching a 5-minute ferry across the Sound. Property on Jura averages £300,000 to £355,000, sitting 41% above the Argyll and Bute average, but only around 6 transactions went through in 3 years because almost nothing comes onto the market. 7 private estates control most of the land. 4G connectivity only arrived in 2023 through 2 new masts, and that alone was described as a turning point for healthcare and daily life. These 3 islands expose the central tension in island economics. Success brings money. Money pushes property prices up. Rising prices squeeze out the very communities that created the economic value in the first place. The islands that solve their housing crisis will survive. The ones that do not will become theme parks with nobody left to run them. Part 6. Scotland in miniature. 2 hours from Glasgow, Isle of Arran. If island life with a safety net appeals to you, Arran is where to look. 432 square kilometers in the Firth of Clyde, 4,618 residents as of the 2022 census, and a geological story that runs right through the middle of it. The Highland Boundary Fault crosses the island, throwing up rugged mountains in the north where Goatfell reaches 874 meters, then flattening into gentle pastoral lowlands in the south. That dramatic split earned Arran the nickname Scotland in miniature and a UNESCO Global Geopark designation in April 2024. Calmax ferry from Ardrossan takes 55 minutes, and the entire journey from Glasgow clocks in at under 2 hours. No other Scottish island in this video comes close to that level of access. Average property sits at approximately £273,000, but roughly 25% of homes serve as second homes or holiday lets, and that concentration creates an acute housing shortage that drives key workers away. The Arran Development Trust is fighting back with 18 new affordable rental homes at Lamlash and 23 service self-build plots, carrying a rural housing burden, a legal tool that locks the properties into permanent residence in perpetuity. That model, restricting ownership to people who actually live there, may be the single most useful innovation in Scottish island housing right now. Arran War Memorial Hospital in Lamlash holds 17 beds and provides accident and emergency services, maternity care, and outpatient clinics, which is far more than most Scottish islands can offer. Full schooling, supermarkets, and a diverse economy built around 2 whiskey distilleries at Lochranza and Lag, a brewery, artisan food producers, and the Coast Marine Conservation Project round out daily life. Coast established Scotland's first no-take zone in Lamlash Bay. Community energy projects are growing. The operational Duggery hydro scheme generates 500 kilowatts, enough for around 400 homes, and the approved Merkland Burn hydro scheme adds capacity for approximately 200 more. Holy Island in Lamlash Bay belongs to the Sami Ling Buddhist community and houses a center for world peace and health, which creates the unusual experience of being able to see a Buddhist retreat center from the window of a Scottish island hospital. After years of politically charged delays, the new MV Glensannox entered ferry service in January 2025, with MV Glen Rosa expected in April 2026. For anyone weighing the practical balance between island life and mainland access, with a functioning hospital, full schooling, affordable housing programs, and Glasgow reachable before lunch, Arran beats everything else on this list. Part 7. England's largest island and the most expensive ferry in the world, Isle of Wight. The Isle of Wight operates on a completely different scale, 380 square kilometers, approximately 141,000 people, easily the most populated island in this report, separated from Hampshire by just 2 to 5 miles of the Solent. Average house prices sit at £294,000, essentially tracking the national average but landing well below mainland Hampshire. The catch sits on the other side of the equation. Average salaries on the Isle of Wight run 17.5% below the national figure, coming in at £27,534. But the ferry is the story that defines the Isle of Wight experience. Whitelink and Red Funnel run approximately 975 sailings per week, with crossings lasting between 22 and 45 minutes depending on the route. Peak summer car returns reportedly hit £440, earning the route a reputation as the most expensive short crossing in the world. And unlike Scottish island ferries, no state subsidy applies. Foot passenger returns range from £15 to £80 depending on operator and timing. Whitelink paid £8 million in dividends to shareholders in 2022 while residents described themselves as held to ransom. That creates a peculiar gap in British infrastructure policy, where a Scottish islander traveling 2 hours and 40 minutes from Stornoway to Ullapool receives a government-subsidized ferry, while an Isle of Wight resident crossing 22 minutes of the Solent pays full commercial rate to a private company, sending profits to its shareholders. Beyond the ferry issue, the island has full infrastructure. St. Mary's Hospital in Newport is receiving a £22 million investment program. A complete school system, supermarket chains, and broad retail make it functionally self-contained. The Isle of Wight Festival, revived in 2002 after the legendary 1970 original drew 600,000 people to see Hendrix's last major performance, pulls in significant tourism alongside more than 2 million annual visitors. England's highest density of dinosaur fossils sits here, and the island carries UNESCO Biosphere Reserve status. 380 square kilometers of agricultural land and a mild climate give the Isle of Wight the greatest theoretical food production potential of any island in this report. It lacks remoteness. Getting a car across costs a small fortune, but anyone who wants island living within commuting distance of the south coast, with a full NHS hospital, supermarkets, and a working economy, will find the mainstream option here. Part 8. Subtropical Beauty. At an unsustainable price, Isles of Scilly. 28 miles southwest of Land's End, the Isles of Scilly cover just 16 square kilometers across 5 inhabited islands, with a population that has fallen to approximately 2,200 as of the 2021 census, a decline of 6.8% from 2011. These islands are staggeringly beautiful. Gulf Stream warmth enables subtropical growing, Tresco Abbey Gardens draws visitors from around the world, and white sand beaches sit against water that rivals the Mediterranean. None of that changes the economics though, and the economics are brutal. £550,000 is the average property price, which ranks 15th highest out of 318 English and Welsh local authorities. The Duchy of Cornwall owns approximately 75% of the total landmass and around 1/3 of residential housing. Tresco operates entirely under the Dorian Smith family on a long lease from the Duchy dating back to 1834. A conventional property market does not really exist here. The council declared a housing crisis in January 2022. Governing these islands falls to the Council of the Isles of Scilly, a sui generis unitary authority, one of only 2 in the UK alongside the City of London Corporation. England's smallest council runs on just 16 councillors and around 130 employees, which works out to roughly 10% of the adult population. A single subsea cable installed in 1988 to 89 with a capacity of 7.5 megawatts handles the electricity supply, and water comes partly from a desalination plant. Tourism accounts for approximately 85% of income on the islands. Local earnings run at only around 70% of the national average, and the fuel poverty ranking sits 8th highest in England. The Selonian 3 crosses seasonally from Penzance in 2 hours and 45 minutes, starting at £42 single. Skybus flights from Land's End take 15 to 20 minutes at around £85 each way. No cars travel across. The Isles of Scilly demonstrate clearly that beauty and affordability almost never share the same address. Narcissi flower farming has run here since the 1860s. The climate supports growing that would be impossible anywhere else in Britain, but duchy ownership, property prices locked above $500,000, and near total dependence on tourism create a fragility that the council's own housing crisis declaration spells out in plain language. For most people, the Isles of Scilly will remain somewhere to visit, not somewhere to live. Part 9. The bridge-connected island with nuclear ambitions, Anglesey, Ynys, Wales. Anglesey stands apart from every other island on this list because 2 bridges connect it to the mainland. The Menai Suspension Bridge from 1826 and the Britannia Bridge rebuilt after a fire in 1970. No ferry costs hit the daily commute, and yet the island holds a fiercely distinct identity, with over 57% of residents speaking Welsh, making it the second most Welsh-speaking local authority in the country. All council and school business runs bilingually. 714 square kilometers, with a population of approximately 69,000. Average property prices come in at £242,000 as of December 2025, sitting above the Welsh average of £215,000, but below the UK average. Band D council tax lands at £1,706 for 2025 to 26, and 100% premium on second homes kicked in during April 2024. The old designation, Mon Mam Saimru, meaning Mother of Wales, points to the island's fertile agricultural land, which makes it well suited for food growing and livestock. Bridge access, Welsh cultural immersion, and property prices below the national average combine here in a way that no other island on this list can replicate. The biggest news out of Anglesey came in November 2025, when Wilfa was selected as the site for the United Kingdom's first small modular reactors. 3 initial Rolls-Royce SMR units with potential expansion to 8, carrying an investment exceeding £2.5 billion, approximately 3,000 construction jobs, and a grid connection targeted for the mid-2030s. Wilfa's original Magnox station closed in 2015 and is now being decommissioned. Anglesey Freeport designation and the Menai Science Park, Wales's first science park, are both feeding new economic activity into the island. Holyhead still operates as the UK's second busiest roll-on roll-off port. RAF Valley trains the UK's fast jet pilots, and somewhere on the island sits the famous longest place name in Europe, which we are going to leave unspoken. Part 10. Northern Ireland's only inhabited offshore island, Rathlin Island. 1,400 hectares of land sitting 6 nautical miles from Ballycastle, off County Antrim's northeast coast. That is Rathlin, Northern Ireland's only inhabited offshore island, home to 141 people as of the 2021 census. That number is slowly climbing from a low of around 75 to 100 in the late 20th century, though 1,000 people lived here at the start of the 1900s. The Northern Ireland Executive's Rathlin Island policy from 2010 and its associated action plans actively push for sustainable community growth, with a ministerial forum meeting twice a year. Maine's electricity only reached Rathlin via undersea cable in 2007. Before 1992, there was no Maine's electricity at all. A carbon neutrality target of 2030 drives exploration into green hydrogen for ferries, heating, and transport, though more than 95% of non-electric energy still comes from fossil fuels. Rathlin Island Ferry Limited runs year-round from Ballycastle, with the catamaran crossing in 25 to 30 minutes for foot passengers and the cargo vessel taking 40 minutes. Adult returns cost approximately 12 to 16 pounds, and cars are generally restricted to residents and blue badge holders. History on Rathlin punches well above what the population would suggest. Robert the Bruce sheltered here in 1306, and the famous spider legend traces back to Bruce's cave on this island. Guglielmo Marconi set up the world's first commercial wireless telegraphy link from Rathlin's East Lighthouse to Ballycastle on the 6th of July, 1898. Rathlin Westlight, with its lantern mounted at the bottom rather than the top, now houses the RSPB Seabird Centre, looking out over Northern Ireland's largest seabird colony. McQuaig's Bar serves as the island's social hub. A community co-op shop covers basic supplies. Between 9 and 17 pupils attend the primary school depending on the year. Rathlin offers a slowly recovering community with active government support and deep history, though housing options remain extremely thin. Part 11. The Crown Dependencies, tax havens you can actually live in. At this point, we leave the United Kingdom entirely, not in terms of geography, but in terms of law. The Isle of Man, Alderney, and Sark are Crown Dependencies, which means they are not part of the United Kingdom. Each one governs itself with its own legislature, its own legal system, and its own tax regime. Westminster handles only defense and international relations. None of these islands have representation in the UK Parliament. None of them were ever EU members, but they all sit inside the common travel area with the UK and Ireland, so no immigration control applies for British and Irish citizens. What that creates in practice is 3 islands operating under financial rules that bear almost no resemblance to the mainland, and those rules deserve a close look. Isle of Man, the oldest parliament and zero capital gains tax. Roughly equidistant between England, Scotland, and Northern Ireland, the Isle of Man covers 572 square kilometers with a population of approximately 84,000. Douglas, which received city status in 2024, serves as the capital. Tynwald, the Manx Parliament, claims to be the oldest continuous parliament in the world, tracing Norse origins back more than 1,000 years. The tax setup here is what draws attention. Income tax runs at 10% on the first £6,500 for a single person and 21% after that, with a personal allowance of £14,750. Zero capital gains tax, zero inheritance tax, zero wealth tax, zero stamp duty on property transfers, a tax cap of £220,000 per individual pulls in wealthy residents. VAT matches the UK at 20%, because the Isle of Man and UK share a common customs territory. Corporation tax runs at 0% for most companies. Average house prices land between £342,000 and £384,000, and there are no housing qualification restrictions, which means anyone can buy freely. That distinction separates the Isle of Man from both Jersey and Guernsey, where residency rules control who can purchase property. The TT races have run since 1907. pulling approximately 40,000 visitors a year and generating an estimated economic impact of £39 million. The 37.73-mile Snaefell mountain course holds the unwanted title of the most dangerous motorcycle race in the world, with more than 250 riders killed since 1907. Financial services account for around 50% of the economy, and the Manx government is actively targeting a population of 100,000 by 2037, offering immigration incentives, including a national insurance holiday scheme. The Isle of Man Steam Packet Company, which has run continuously since 1830 and holds the record as the world's oldest operating passenger shipping company, connects to Heysham and Liverpool. Ronaldsway Airport serves multiple UK cities. Nobles Hospital in Douglas delivers full healthcare through Manx Care. For anyone sitting on significant assets, drawing investment income, or planning how to pass on an estate without inheritance tax stripping it, the Isle of Man offers genuine, legal, and large financial advantages while providing the infrastructure of a small country. It is not an offshore fantasy. 84,000 people live here with a hospital, an airport, a parliament, and a motorcycle race that kills people. Alderney, the Channel Island where anyone can buy, 8 square kilometers, 2,167 residents as of March 2023, and a legislative body called the States of Alderney with 10 elected members and a president. Alderney sits at the northern end of the Channel Islands, technically part of the bailiwick of Guernsey, but governing itself on most domestic matters. The killer advantage Alderney holds over Jersey and Guernsey is straightforward. Anyone with an EU or UK passport can buy property here without restriction. No housing qualification system. No local market versus open market split. That makes Alderney the only Channel Island where a new arrival can simply purchase a home. Compare that to the alternatives. Jersey runs a 4-tier system where only people with more than 10 years of residence buy freely, and high-value residents need to spend above £1.75 million. Guernsey divides housing into an open market of approximately 1,600 pre-tier properties that British and Irish passport holders can access, and a local market locked to those born there or with 8+ years of residence. Alderney skips all of that. 3-bedroom homes average between £350,000 and £400,000, with the full range running from approximately £240,000 up to £7.6 million. Income tax sits at a flat 20% through the Guernsey system, but Alderney offers new arrivals a special tax cap of £65,000 per year from 2024, well below Guernsey's general cap of £160,000. Capital gains tax does not exist. Inheritance tax does not exist. VAT does not exist. GST does not exist. The absence of VAT alone creates a meaningful daily saving over both the UK and the Isle of Man. Wartime history weighs heavily on this island. Nearly the entire population evacuated in June 1940, and the German occupation brought forced labor and concentration camps, the only such camps built on British soil. Population recovery has been slow, but is now accelerating, with approximately 100 people looking to relocate each year. The Alderney Gambling Control Commission, which licenses online gambling operations, brings in roughly £1.9 to £2.2 million annually, a serious revenue stream for a jurisdiction this size. Orkney Air Services flies daily to Southampton and Guernsey. Alderney is the realistic Channel Island. Less glamorous than Jersey, less established than Guernsey, but the one where you can actually turn up, buy a house, and start living without spending a decade qualifying for the right to do so. No capital gains tax, no inheritance tax, and no VAT while you do it. Sark, no cars, no income tax, no streetlights, 5.44 square kilometers, around 500 people and falling. No cars at all, just feet, bicycles, horse-drawn carriages and tractors. No paved roads, no streetlights, no airport. And in 2011, the International Dark Sky Association designated Sark as the world's first dark sky island. This is the final entry on the list, and it may be the strangest place in this entire report. Until 2008, Sark was considered Europe's last feudal state. The chief police, the island's parliament, sat as a body of hereditary tenement holders until reform converted it into 28 democratically elected members, plus the hereditary seigneur and an appointed seneschal. December 2008 brought the first democratic election, pushed partly by European Convention on Human Rights challenges from the Barclay brothers, the billionaire owners of neighboring Brecco Island. The tax picture on Sark looks like nothing else in the British Isles. No income tax, no capital gains tax, no inheritance tax, no VAT, no corporation tax. What residents pay instead is a property tax based on building size, running approximately £776 to £1,164 a year for a typical 3-bedroom home, plus a personal capital tax averaging roughly £3,500 to £5,000 annually. But a tax reform consultation launched in January 2025 signals that increases are coming. Sark has burned through its financial reserves, and the total government budget sits at just about £2 million a year. Property ranges from around £300,000 at the low end to over £1 million for premium homes. Approximately 330 properties exist on the island, and around 80 of them, roughly 20%, belong to Barclay family interests. Those holdings are reportedly on the market following Sir David Barclay's death in 2021, and a sale could reshape the island's property landscape completely. Electricity stands as the most serious vulnerability Sark faces. A privately owned company called the Sark Electricity Company runs diesel generators, and in September 2025, the price per unit more than doubled, jumping to approximately £1.14 from 49p, triggered by a legal dispute with Chief Pleas over compulsory purchase. No grid connection exists. Renewable energy remains limited. Broadband coverage is patchy. Mobile signal is unreliable. One resident doctor, one volunteer constable, and a tractor-mounted ambulance represent the emergency services. The Isle of Sark Shipping Company operates year-round from Guernsey with crossings of 35 to 55 minutes, running 4 to 5 sailings daily in summer and dropping to 1 or 2 in winter. Sark is not going to work for most people. The electricity crisis on its own would send the majority of them back to the mainland. A declining population, a government running out of money, limited broadband, and the absence of infrastructure that the rest of Britain takes for granted make this a genuinely difficult place to build a life. But for someone who wants to live on an island with no cars, no streetlights, no income tax, and a night sky so dark that the Milky Way stretches overhead with the naked eye, nothing else on Earth comes close. The only question that matters is whether Sark can hold together long enough to keep offering it.